We're going to be solving paper 1. Questions are applicable for both the core and the extended candidates. We're going to be solving the chemistry stuff, and the topic is going to be alcohols. We're going to be doing organic chemistry today. And first we're going to do both, and then we're going to do paper 2. That's only for the extended candidates. So let's get started. And if you're doing O levels as well, this content is going to be relevant for you guys as well. So let's start. Which statements about ethanol are correct? Ethanol is basically an alcohol that is made by fermentation, and then it can be also made by your alkenes. The hydration of your alkenes, adding steam to your alkene, can also make ethanol. Ethanol is made by reacting steam with ethene at 300 degrees Celsius. That is exactly correct, because whenever you're gonna take ethene, that is your alkene, plus you add steam to it, that is your water in gaseous form, you are gonna form ethanol. But there are little conditions for this reaction. You need temperature of 300 degrees Celsius, you need pressure of 60 atm, and you need H3PO4, which is phosphoric acid catalyst. So these are the three conditions, but this statement is correct. Ethanol is made by fermentation at 55 degrees Celsius. That is incorrect. Fermentation happens by using your bacteria. Now I'm going to give you a very good reason for this. That is, fermentation happens because of your not because of bacteria, because of yeast. I'm sorry for this. It happens because of yeast, right? Yeast helps ferment the sugar or whatever the thing you're using. And you need to realize that yeast is a living organism. It's a living thing. So if you're going to use temperatures of 55 degrees Celsius, your yeast is gonna die. So that is why for fermentation we use about room temperature, that is 36 degrees Celsius or 37, or like not this much, still not this much, sorry, about 25, or like temperatures that are like room, near the room temperature, right? Or a little higher, like lukewarm, but not like 55 is like, I think, a lot warm. So no. Ethanol burns to produce carbon dioxide and water. That is 100% correct. All alkenes, all alcohols are gonna burn. These are organic compounds. They burn to produce carbon dioxide and water. Ethanol contains carbon-carbon double bond. No, it does not contain. If we draw the structure of ethanol, it is a carbon bonded to a carbon, and the last carbon has, or the first, you can start the counting from anywhere, it has a OH group attached to it. So there are just two carbons, and then there's an OH group attached to it. This is what is ethanol. So there's no carbon-carbon double bond. Well, it was ethanol, then there could have been a carbon-carbon double bond. That would be ethanol, not ethanol. This "and" means, now I'm going to tell you another trick over here. I write ethanol. Now look, the trick. Alkanes don't have bonds. So ethanol, anol, will not have bond. Alkenes, enes have bond. So ethanol is going to have a double bond. Pentanol is going to have, but pentanol will not have, because an is from the alkane part, no double bond. Ene is from the alkene part, double bond. Got it? So that's the stuff. Which diagram shows the displayed formula? So 1 and 3 were correct. 1 and 3. Which diagram shows the displayed formula of ethanol? We just do it. We need 2 carbon atoms. 2 carbon, 2 carbon, 3 carbon, no, 3 carbon, no. Next step, we need a OH group and OH group. Both are correct, but there's a little trick over here. We don't need the carboxylic part. This C double bond O, what does this show? This show carboxylic acid part. C double bond O is carboxylic acid. This is your ethanoic acid. Why? Because there is this acid functional group over here. That is incorrect. OH means a simple ethanol. For alcohol, we have OH. The C double bond OH means a carboxylic acid. Which word equation represents the preparation of ethanol? Okay, firstly, you take ethene, you take water. Done. You only form ethanol. You don't form any other product except ethanol, because the equation is very simple. Look, I'm going to draw it for you. You have ethene. This is your ethene. Okay? This is your ethene, and this is your water. Okay? H2O. Now, what happens is, this entire part, the product is this entire part with the double bond removed, and you have this H attached here, and 2 new bonds are formed, this and this. So simple. You break this, put the OH here, put the H here, you make ethanol. So how can you form carbon dioxide from here? Doesn't make sense. Ethane plus water, ethanol, no, we cannot add water to the alkane. We add it to alkenes. Enes we need. Glucose plus yeast, ethanol plus water, no, we don't form water here. We form carbon dioxide in fermentation. Why do we form carbon dioxide? Because you must have noticed that your bread, now let me tell you how do you form carbon. Have you guys seen the bread? It has some, like, it's very spongy. It has some bubbles in it of air. Like, there are two type of brownies, one that's very gooey and the other that's spongy. How come you make that sponge thing in the bread? You add yeast, and then yeast ferments, and that produces carbon dioxide gas, and that carbon dioxide gas makes your dough, air bubbles in your dough, and those air bubbles create that spongy feeling. Got it? So that's why it's option A. And then ethanol is a byproduct as well. It's also going to be formed. Then you might realize, oh my god, when I eat the bread, I consume ethanol, and that's not allowed, and that stuff. No. Why no? Because when you put it in the oven, the ethanol, it evaporates. Got it? So you only get the carbon dioxide benefit, that your dough becomes very airy. Which statement about ethanol are correct? Ethanol is used as a solvent. Yeah, that's correct. It's very soluble. Why? Because of the OH bond. It makes it polar. Ethanol can be made directly from ethane. No direct. It can be made directly from ethene. We need the ene part. We add the water in the ethene, and then you get the alcohol. Ethanol is a covalent compound. Ethanol, yeah, it's a compound. It's covalent as well. Why? Because look. Compound mean more than one atom chemically combined. Carbon, OH, H. How many different types of atoms we're dealing with? Firstly, we're dealing with carbons, then we're dealing with hydrogens, and then we're dealing with oxygens. So we're dealing with 3 different types of atoms. Yeah, well, it's gonna be a compound, and it's covalent, because look, we have proper 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 covalent bonds here. So 1 and 3 are correct. Now we're only moving to the extended candidate part. Which statement about the reaction of ethene and steam are correct? The product has higher molecular mass than ethane. Yeah, that's correct, because look, so this means that statement 1 is correct. Statement 2 says that the product reacts with aqueous bromine. Well, the product is ethanol. Ethanol is carbon, then there is an OH here, H, and H. So it's basically C2H5OH. This is your ethanol. So meaning that ethanol is going to react with bromine. I don't think we have any reaction in the syllabus that makes bromine reacts with ethanol. Bromine is Br single bonded to a Br. Well, it can't be added into ethanol. There can't be an addition reaction. Well, there can be a substitution reaction that a hydrogen is replaced by bromine, but that's not in your syllabus. So the product reacts with aqueous bromine, no. If it was an alkene, the ethene, which is the reactant, would react with aqueous bromine, but the product would not. The number of electrons shared between carbon atoms decreases. Okay, so first you need to realize one thing, that initially how many electrons are being shared? You have this kind of thing, right? The number of electrons between the carbon atom is, in this bond there are 2 electrons, and then in this bond there are 2 electrons. So in total you have 4 electrons. But when you come to your ethanol, you just have a single bond between the carbon atoms, so there are just 2 electrons. So basically you are moving from 4 electrons to 2 electrons. So the number of electrons shared between carbon atoms decreases. Yeah, you're going from 4 to 2. So that's a decrease. The reaction produces an alcohol and hydrogen. Well, alcohol is produced, that's ethanol, but no hydrogen is produced. There's only one product. You should just learn this, that whenever you have ethene and you add steam to it, you make your ethanol, and that's the only product formed. The conditions are also very clear: 300 degrees Celsius temperature, 360 atmospheric pressure, phosphoric acid catalyst or simple acid catalyst, and the only product is ethanol. Always remember, always remember. In addition reactions, alkenes, this is an alkene, right? Alkenes give addition reaction, you add things into it. In addition reactions, only a single product is formed. Like if the definition for an addition reaction comes, a reaction in which only a single product is formed, right? In A levels as well, they ask the definition for addition reactions. You should learn it. So it's basically 1 and 3, which makes sense. Ethanol is produced industrially by fermentation. This is for extended only. And also by a catalyzed addition reaction involving steam, which row describes the advantage of each process. So basically, fermentation happens when you have your glucose. Fermentation happens when you have your glucose and you ferment it in the presence of yeast. So fermentation, the reactant used is renewable. It is very rapid. No, fermentation is a very slow process. So, and the reactant used is glucose and yeast, right? So basically, you're gonna have your glucose and plus you have your yeast, and what you produce is your carbon dioxide gas, and the second thing you produce is your ethanol, which is C2H5OH. So one thing over here is that glucose come from trees, right? It's gonna be a sugar cane plant. So if it's coming from trees, you know trees are renewable or non-renewable. They are renewable because you can plant them again and again. So the reactant is renewable. It is a continuous process. Yeah, that's correct. It is continuous, whereas with the glucose, it's a batch process. Like the fermentation is basically a batch process. It happens in batches. But the catalyzed addition of steam is continuous because it keeps on happening and you just have to put in the reactant. So that's correct. It requires little energy. No, this is not correct. It requires a lot of energy. When you have to supply this much temperature and this much pressure, obviously a lot of energy is going to be required. So option B makes no sense over here. Option A makes sense because it's going to happen continuously. Ethanol can be produced by fermentation. Well, that's correct. And by the catalytic addition of steam to ethene. They call it catalytic addition because you basically add a catalyst to it. The name of the catalyst is H3PO4, phosphoric acid. You can take sulfuric acid, or if you don't want to name the acid specifically, just write acid catalyst. That's going to make sense, which shows the advantages and disadvantages of each process. Fermentation advantages, it's a batch process. Well, that's not an advantage. You would rather take a continuous process. Fast reaction, no, fermentation is slow. Renewable raw material, yeah, that's correct, because I told you that for fermentation, what do we use? We use glucose, that is renewable. So this makes sense. Next, disadvantage, batch process, impure ethanol formed. Yeah, I think we should consider both. Yeah, because for the fermentation, I am just gonna tell you one thing, that when you have glucose and you just add yeast to it and you make your ethanol and you make carbon dioxide, the percentage purity of the ethanol is only 15%. You know why? Because yeast is a living organism, right? And when excess ethanol, now listen to this thing very carefully, when excess ethanol is produced, it kills the yeast. When 15% ethanol is present in the solution, it kills the yeast, like about 15%. So no more glucose can be converted into ethanol because the yeast is killed by the product. So the thing the yeast makes, it kills it. So that's why they also say that humans are also like yeast. They're making carbon dioxide gas because we're humans. And by means of industrialization and urbanization and the tree cutting thing and everything that we're doing, we're like moving forward as a society. What happens is we produce more carbon dioxide, and that's just like the yeast producing ethanol, which kills it eventually. So that they say that the humans also producing carbon dioxide, it's going to kill the humans, just like the ethanol the yeast produces kills itself. So what you're producing kills you. So humans producing toxic gases and this much is going to kill the human thing, the global warming thing. They just say this. We're just like the yeast, killing ourselves. So that's the thing over here. So you need to realize that impure ethanol is formed. That's correct. Catalytic addition is going to give you pure ethanol. Yeah, it is pure. That's good. Fast reaction. Yeah, it's very fast as well. Disadvantage, slow reaction. No, No, it's not slow, it's very fast. Finite raw material. Well, that's correct because look, what you're using for your catalytic addition is ethene, and ethene is a hydrocarbon, right? And where do you get your hydrocarbon? You get your hydrocarbon from the fractional distillation, of your crude oil, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, from oil you make your plastics because you get your hydrocarbons from the fractional distillation. And then you need to realize one thing: crude oil is a fossil fuel, and you should know that fossil fuels are non renewable. That means it's going to take millions and billions of years for them to form again from the dead organisms or whatever, from the dead plants or whatever. Whereas natural gas is like formed from the dead sea aquatic organisms. Natural gas and crude oil is formed from the dead sea organisms that decompose over time. So it's non-renewable because it's going to take a lot of years to form. So that means that this is correct. So it's finite. Ethanoic acid is made by reacting ethanol with acidified potassium manganate. That is correct. That is an oxidation reaction that you have your ethanol. And what happens is that you oxidize it. How do you oxidize? You add an oxidizing agent to it. And what kind of oxidizing agent you use? You use acidified KMNO4. And then what do you form? You form an acid. Which type of reaction occurs? When ethanol reacts with potassium manganate, oxidation. Simple. This is an oxidizing agent. So ethanol is made industrially by the fermentation of glucose or by the catalytic addition of steam to ethene. Which statement describes the advantage of fermentation compared to catalytic addition? Oh, so we have to tell why fermentation is a good process. Ethanol is the only product of fermentation. Well, that's wrong. You have like some leftover glucose as well. That doesn't make sense. And moreover, you should know that you produce carbon dioxide in fermentation. Fermentation uses a batch process, but catalytic addition is continuous. Well, that's correct, but that's not an advantage. That's a disadvantage. Fermentation uses a higher temperature than catalytic addition. No, fermentation uses lower temperature because fermentation relies on yeast, and you should know that yeast is a living organism, and when you're dealing with living organisms, well, you can't use temperatures higher than that of the optimum temperature of the enzymes, right? So you cannot use very high temperatures. That's going to lead to the death of the yeast, and if your yeast dies, what are you going to do? What's going to ferment the glucose? So that's incorrect. Fermentation uses renewable resource. That's correct. The renewable resource is called glucose. And with that, are we done? 9. Yeah, we're done, and that's all for alcohols.